We all know that compounds are made up of atoms of different elements, but how does that work? What's the process? What happens to their valence electrons, their charges?
Well, don't worry. There are three different types of bonds: covalent, ionic, and metallic. Let me explain. Valence electrons. There's three types of bonding.
We know that atoms have valence electrons. Atoms of the same element have the same number of them. The lowest number of valence electrons atoms can have is 1, and the highest is 8.
Since the highest is 8, each atom wants to fulfill
The octet rule.
or to try to somehow obtain 8 valence electrons by bonding.
Know that there are metals, transition metals, and nonmetals. When two nonmetal atoms form a bond, they form a covalent bond. When a metal and a nonmetal bond, they form an ionic bond. And when two metals bond, they form a metallic bond.
There are different ways for nonmetals atoms to share electrons. They can form a single bond where 2 electrons are shared. There is also a double bond and a triple bond. In a double bond, there are 2 sets of single bonds, and in a triple bond, there are 3 sets of single bonds.
Ionic bonds are stronger than covalent bonds because they are formed between two oppositely charged atoms. Henceforth, opposites attract. Here's an example of a single bond. Hydrogen, which has 1 valence electron, and fluorine, who has 7, both want to obtain 8. In order to do that, hydrogen gives up its 1 valence electron to fluorine, and they share it, forming a single bond. This way, both of them can have 8. What are covalent bonds? Covalent bonds are made up of 2 nonmetals. They share their electrons equally. Picture a hand which is representing a valence electron. This hand is holding another, so there are 2 valence electrons in total, but each are sharing only 1. This is a single bond, and is also polar. Covalent bonds usually keep the same properties as most other nonmetals. Covalent bonds have low melting and boiling points, soft or brittle solid forms, poor electrical conductivity, and poor thermal conductivity. An example of a double bond is 2 oxygen atoms. Both oxygen atoms have 6 valence electrons, and both want to obtain 8. If both want to obtain 8, they need to form a double bond. This way, each oxygen atom now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They both have 8 valence electrons, and this way, they fulfill
The octet rule.
Get hydrogen peroxide, H2O2. This is a covalent bond, meaning that both hydrogen and oxygen are 2 nonmetals. This makes it the world's safest disinfectant since it uses oxidation to cure infections and such things as cuts, scars, and burns. It can also be used as a disinfectant in contact lenses since they are used if they're dirty and they get dropped on the ground. You can get this as a low price for $40, but if you order it now, you'll get it for $100.
This is an example of a triple bond. Here we have 2 nitrogen atoms. Both nitrogen atoms have 5 valence electrons each, and each one to fulfill
The octet rule.
by getting 8. In order to make this possible, we need to form a triple bond between these 2 atoms. One bond is worth or counted as 2 valence electrons. This way, each atom now has 1, 2, 4, 6, 8 valence electrons, and this fulfills the octet rule.
The octet rule.
What is metallic bonding? Well, these atoms are actually positively charged ions. A metal or metal alloy consists of positive charged metal ions embedded in a sea of valence electrons. The more valence electrons an atom can add to the sea, the stronger the metallic bonds will be. Solid metals consist of positive charged ions surrounded by a loose sea of valence electrons. As you can see, valence electrons are in a sea, while the The ions are arranged in patterns. In metallic bonding, they both keep the properties when forming a compound. This means that they keep properties of metals such as metallic luster, electroconductivity, thermal conductivity, and malleability and ductility. This means that aluminum foil is used for cooking and insulating foods. It's very thin for easy ripping and tearing. Our foil is purely aluminum. Your food will always be warm with a piece of aluminum foil over your dish. The foil is alone $7.88, which is low compared to the cost of a brick of aluminum that you'll have to cut yourself. Alloys are a mixture of two or more elements that have properties of metal. An example would be this trumpet. This trumpet is made out of brass. And brass is a mixture of two elements that have properties of metal, which are zinc and copper. Therefore, this trumpet is made out of an alloy. What is an ionic bond? An ionic bond is the taking of valence electrons between a metal and a nonmetal. If the electrons are being taken, then that means one atom will have more electrons than the other. The atom with more valence electrons will be negative, while the other will become positive. The metal usually takes the electrons, becoming negatively charged, while the nonmetal usually loses the electron, becoming positively charged. Bonds have higher melting points in electrical conductivity compared to covalent bonds. This means that they're harder to melt and can transfer electricity better than covalent bonds.
Mom,
What, Kaya?
I learned a lot today.
What did you learn?
Sodium is very flammable. It can create a fire. I think I'm gonna go do that.
Just don't make a mess. And remember to eat your crust.
And for this nifty home experiment, you will need 1 spoon, 2 glasses that are the same size, dishwashing soap, water, 2 identical sized paper balls, and you also need a measuring cup and something to measure tablespoons. So first, depending on the size of your glasses, what you want to do is measure an equal amount of water for both of your glasses so that they're not overflowing, but it's more full than empty. So for my glasses, they would need to be 1 1/4 cups, so I'm going to pour till there. After that, you want to take your tablespoon and measure 2 tablespoons of dishwashing soap and pour them into 1 glass, since 1 glass will only be water and 1 will be a solution of dishwashing soap and water. So you want 2 tablespoons of dishwashing soap, and then a spoon and equally stir the soap so that you can no longer see the soap sitting at the bottom. So now what you want to do is take your 2 equally sized paper balls and gently drop them into your solutions, 1 in each. So as you can clearly see, 1 paper ball sinks. The paper ball in the soap water solution sinks faster than the one in water. This is because soap in particular decreases the surface tension of water by weakening the hydrogen bonds that make water such a special substance. Soap lowers the surface tension of a liquid. The lower surface tension has 2 effects. First, that means the paper can't sit on top of the water's surface, and second, by weakening the hydrogen bonds, it allows more water to soak into the paper, making it more dense making it sink. Also, the hydrogen bonds in water are not strong. Covalent bonds are weaker than ionic bonds. This is shown by how the covalent bond H2O gets weakened when it comes in contact with the soap. The hydrogen bonds get weakened, causing the paper to sink. That's because in covalent bonds, the valence electrons aren't held as closely as in ionic.
Hi, this is Kaya, and I'm going to be answering your questions on Question Corner. An ion is an atom or a group of atoms that has electric charge. Has 1, 2, or 3 valence electrons, then you know it gives electrons away. If it has 5, 6, or 7 electrons, then you know it takes electrons away. If it has 8, then it neither gives nor takes electrons. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. The difference between a nonpolar and polar bond is that a polar bond has electrons that are shared unequally, and a nonpolar bond, they're shared equally.